You're listening to Sports Radio Detroit.
Well, Fred, just like that, 17 years has come and gone since the infamous tragic day of 9/11. And I have to say, wasn't a whole lot about it this year. Of course, everyone was posting on Facebook saying 9/11, never forget, yada, yada, yada. But I feel like it kind of snuck up on us this year. And I think mainly because 17 is kind of an odd anniversary. It's not 5 years, it's not 10 years, it's not 20 or 25. It's not one of those big major milestones that happen on the 5s and 10s. And, it seems like every year sort of the day kind of sneaks up on you. Like the first few years, you're like, oh, it's September 9th. In 2 days, it's the anniversary of 9/11. But this year, I woke up on the 11th, and I looked on my Facebook feed, and I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's been 17 years.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to think about because I guess it was literally the first 11 years of the first 11 anniversaries anyways, there was still something going on. They were cleaning up the site and they were repairing stuff and they were creating the memorial and they were making all these efforts. So there was still like a conscious effort towards it and you could be updated. But I think the biggest story I heard this year about the location at least is I think like the subway station they were reopened for the first time like 2 weeks ago.
Since the actual attack?
Since the actual attack, yeah, because obviously there's a lot involved with that, but yeah, it's a little eerie, I guess, to say the least. That a thing that the defining moment, obviously in the country it's a defining moment, but
in our lifetime,
our lifetime for certain, it's almost a passing day, which is insulting, really, to think about.
Yes and no. Of course, every year people post never forget, and there really is no way that we can ever forget. I mean, the day can sneak up on us, but for those of us who lived through it and those of us who were old enough to kind of understand something was happening, there's no way we could ever forget what happened. It's almost the phrase itself almost has no meaning anymore. But I honestly don't think it's that bad of a thing for us to put it out of our minds for the most part. I mean, of course, there's the people whose lives were touched by it. They lost a loved one, or and those people they can never kind of escape the horror of that day. But for the rest of the people who, like you and I, Fred, watched from a quote unquote safe distance and knew something terrible was happening, and of course our country's never been the same. We've been fighting extremism. We've been fighting extremism both from abroad and internally. I think for people, for the general population, it's okay to kind of put the day out of your mind for most of the year because I think that shows sort of an ability to move on with our lives. And I remember after it happened and things kind of shut down for a few days, the mentality was like, okay, let's get back to baseball. Let's get back to Monday Night Football because the one thing we can do to make sure that the quote-unquote terrorists don't win is to get on with our lives and to live them as normally as possible. So I think in that aspect, it's okay to not think about it day after day after day. You should commemorate it, but I think it's okay to put it out of your mind for the majority of your everyday life.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's an understanding to it that I, as a junior in high school, didn't possess, and I, as a junior in high school, just thought Al Qaeda, wanted to just kill everyone. That's where my mind was, and that's not what the intent was of 9/11. There's no way to possibly kill. I guess it would be 350 million Americans. That you're just not going to do it. The thing it did do, though, was bring attention that Al Qaeda was seeking and raise resistance for their cause, which, in my opinion, insanely unjust, but in their opinion, driven. But yeah, to return to normality is the one thing that allows you to say, that the intent of what they're trying to do isn't going to have lasting effect, and the goals they have aren't going to affect us for the rest of our lives. And I maybe don't necessarily know how true that is. I sit here 17 years later, and although I don't feel like there was ever an end to 9/11, I would say May 2011 when they killed Osama bin Laden. That to me was kind of the last time I made a phone call about it. Mm-hmm. I remember finding out about that and calling my dad, and it was early evening when I lived in the Midwest, and it was and he was and I I'm like, hey Jenny, go wake him up. I want to talk about this right now. And since then, I don't think I've had a ton of conversation about it outside of the day proper. I did this week though. I did on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday or on Monday? I did this week whenever.
It was Tuesday was the actual anniversary.
Yeah, I did this week on Tuesday, and a conversation I kind of like to have, and I don't know if you've had this, Mike. I don't know how relative this is with you, but I like to ask it in two parts, and the first part is where were you and what was up? And I like to hear everyone's story. People also are very impassioned about that story.
Yeah, and everyone kind of has a story. Everyone says, our parents' generation, everybody knew where they were when Kennedy was shot, and
Discovery show.
Yeah, in our generation, everyone knew where they were on 9/11. Mine's pretty interesting because it's kind of emblematic of the way the world drastically changed in a minute. I was in 11th grade intro to journalism class.
Ooh-wee.
And the project we were doing, of course, it was September 11th. It was the beginning of the year.
And it's 8:15, right, where you're at? No, it's 9:30.
Was it?
Yeah, because you're in the Eastern time zone, so it's happening in real time.
I thought the first plane hit, it's 9:30, right?
Yeah, 9:30-ish. It was 9:30-ish.
Yeah. So our project, since it's the beginning of the year, is we're doing interviews. So we have to interview our classmates. So we're asking the frivolous questions that 11th graders ask. Do you have a boyfriend? What do you like to do for fun? What's your favorite type of music?
Yeah,
and then
favorite
I remember,
Ninja Turtle.
What's that?
Favorite Ninja Turtle.
Right, exactly. Those frivolous questions because we're 11 and we're in 11th grade. We're 17. We have no life experiences. Absolutely nothing interesting about us yet.
Right. Where do you squeeze the toothpaste from?
Right. Toilet paper, over or under. But and then I remember, I don't know how my journalism teacher caught wind of it. Maybe she was just plugged in. That's why she was teaching journalism, Miss O'Neill. She turned on the TV. And there we saw it. The first tower was smoking. And so everyone's kind of watching it. And as a 17-year-old with no understanding of the way the world works, I just remember that day, number one, I didn't feel like I was watching real-life events. I felt like I was watching a Hollywood action movie with special effects, especially when the tower started coming down. It wasn't real to me. Like, intellectually, I knew what was going on, but like the emotional, the human cost, the toll didn't register with me. And then after I thought, oh, okay, well, we're going to find who did this. We're going to kick their ass and we're going to move on from it. I had no idea.
Just like Die Hard.
Right, exactly. I thought, okay, we're the United States. We're the world's police. We're the enforcers of the world. We're going to find out who did this. We're going to eliminate them. And that small group of people who did this will be eliminated, and we'll go on worrying about, who got lucky in the Oval Office, frivolous stuff. And, boy, like you said, 17 years later, we're still seeing effects that we some of it we could have anticipated, but a lot we couldn't.
I was 16. I was a junior in high school. You and I are the same age. And I'm driving to school, and I'm driving to school late because that was my MO. I just got my license. I always just showed up late to school. So as I'm driving in, I would listen to the local college radio station, and it was a kid I worked with at Target. And he
hey, man, listen to my
show.
Radio show.
Yeah. So as he's doing the program, which at the time I didn't realize how terrible it was, he would take callers, and someone called in. And I'm driving to school. It would have been 8:30 Central, but I'm running late, like I said. And this guy says, hey, turn on the TV, man. Something's going on in New York. Somebody just flew into a building. And that's how I heard about it. First was like some jerk-off kid calling a jerk-off college radio station. So I then walk into the school, and I go to the receptionist because I have to sign in late because I'm always late. And I'm like, hey, are you hearing about this? Like this crazy, stuff that's going on. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Sit down. Because she hadn't heard a thing about it. And so and that was the same thing the radio guy said. So like my first interaction was like two people just like denying that it even happened because it was such an outrageous idea. Like to hear it secondhand from someone, the radio guy hearing it from a listener, and me giving it to the reception at the high school, it was preposterous. And that's what we were in. We were in a preposterous moment. Like this didn't connect. It didn't make sense.
Right. And that's exactly what I was saying. Like I said, I wasn't watching events unfold in New York. I was watching, like you said, Die Hard. And if you remember, right after that first plane went into the first tower, people were wondering, was this an accident? Was this airline pilot really stupid? And then you saw the second plane, and you're like, wow, this is serious. And then, in the hours after, someone flew something into a plane into the Pentagon. There was a plane crash over Pennsylvania, and for a quick moment, there was this feeling in the nation like, what's going to happen next? It could happen anywhere. Oh, absolutely. And at the time you said with no life experience and no expectation of what's next, you don't think that like, and I've been to New York. Have you been to New York, Mike? Yeah, I've been to the World Trade Center. Actually, in my room at my parents' house, I have this vanity license plate that says lefties have rights too, because there's like a left-hander shop at the top of the World Trade Center. And I know exactly. Yeah, and the thing about living in large cities, and you live in Detroit, and you'll get this, but living in large, you don't hear airplanes. Airplanes aren't allowed to fly low over large cities. And like adult me would have known that. Adult me, like, if this kind of situation were happening today, my mind would work completely different than it did 17 years ago as a child. And for us, it was a unique time period, being the age we were, because I remember specifically the very next day in the lunchroom, every recruiter from every branch of the military and the pressure that was put on, the peer pressure that was put on to who could be the greatest, hey, I'm a patriot now. Like I'm sign me up. Like I will go and I will kill. And I don't know if you remember the New York Times, but the very next morning, the editorial, it was a cartoon and it was just an eagle sharpening its talons. Like, and that's, and I got goosebumps right now even talking to you. I literally have goosebumps because that was the mentality at the time, right? The mentality at the time was not only are we going to hit back, we're going to hit back with every single thing we have, including these high school kids. Like a grip of kids I grew up with. I was like, my name's on this line. Like I didn't back out until a year later when I learned just how creepy the Marines are. Like it was a weird post moment. Yeah, and it was a few days, and it was a very brief moment in time. We think back to George W. Bush's presidency and just sort of how things just went so sideways after this. But for the few days after, that first time that he was standing in the rubble of the World Trade Center, and he says, I forgot exactly what he says, but he's like, the world can hear us, and the people who did this hear us. He, at that point in time, he had 100% approval rating. He 100%. Yeah. You could say whatever you want about how he handled the Operation Iraqi Freedom and kind of the occupation of Iraq after. In that moment, he did exactly what a president was supposed to do in that moment. No, I agree, and I also still, even today, 17 years later, agree with the mindset that if you're walking down the street and you walk past a group of bullies, and for instance, there's three bullies, right? And at the time they were Al-Qaeda. They were Al-Qaeda in Iraq and whoever else you want to name, Afghanistan itself. And then as you walk past this group of bullies, one punches you in the back of the head. Well, you don't necessarily see which one punched you in the back of the head, but you have to turn around and punch one of them in the fucking face. Mm-hmm. And I get that. And no, you might not have got the right one out the gate, but you're eventually going to get all of them. So I didn't necessarily have a problem with the reaction to it, and I still don't. With that said, that there are a million social herpes in the world and a ton of bad things are constantly happening, and you can't police them all. This group of individuals
had to be corrected because of what had happened to us, and I was in. I bought in on all that, and I'm still convinced of it today. So the follow up question I kind of always give, Mike, and I'm gonna present it to you right now. The follow up question that I like to give when I'm interacting with people, primarily people that I care about and value their opinions, and that is you. Your experience was neat, Mike. Like that is your individual experience of that day, and then obviously you absorbed everything that happened that day. But here's 17 years later, Mike. Are you where we thought we would be? Did you think we would be where we are today as a country 17 years ago when this happened? If 17 years ago someone had asked you, where do you think we will be in 17 years? Would you have projected this?
Well, I guess it depends on which period of time after this happened you would have asked me. If you would have asked me the day of, no. Because like I said, I thought this would be a quick thing. We'd find the small terrorist group who did this, wipe them out, and go along being the most loved and revered country in all of the world, tongue in cheek. If you asked me a year later, after you kind of hear all this stuff about how the United States was in bed with Al Qaeda for this, and this, or the United States gave Al Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan weapons to beat the Soviets, and then they left, and this was all America's own doing, and George W. Bush wants to bring back the draft, then I would say no, because after that happened, and you kind of get the conspiracy theory, and you realize that a lot of what you've been taught has been exaggerated and or not true. At that point in my thinking, I thought 5 years, World War III, we'd all be dead. I think that we're somewhere in the middle. I think that xenophobia against nonviolent Muslims is at an all-time high right now. I think that we haven't had a terrorist attack since. I think a lot of us that day when it happened thought that terrorist attacks on American soil were going to become a regular thing, and a lot of politicians have used that to push their own agenda.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up then, because efforts have absolutely been made, the Patriot Act, and obviously a million travel bans, and there's just a policing of it that didn't exist at the time. So do you feel as if those efforts, and a lot of people say, for safety you sacrifice freedom, would you say that a lot of those efforts have been pro as far as the results, but con as far as the connotation of people?
Well, I think the most recent travel ban wasn't necessarily a mechanism to keep us safe. It was a mechanism to score political points and paint an entire group of people as an enemy to quote-unquote protect us from. The Patriot Act at the time seemed like an overreaction to me, but it didn't become this sort of Orwellian surveillance program that everybody thought that it was going to be, right? Whenever one of these new policies are put into place, everyone's mind jumps to the worst possible scenario, right? The Patriot Act can do this, this, and this, and that means that you could just be sitting in your house taking a dump, and if there's a window around, they can see you on camera. It didn't really go to that extreme, and I'm sure that there's plenty of anti-terrorism policies that we've never heard of. Mm-hmm. And we'll never hear of, that yes, probably has done quite a bit to curb the amount of terrorist attacks on our soil from foreign countries. The Boston Marathon bombing comes to mind as probably the closest thing to one of those instances since 9/11.
Well, yeah, as far as terrorist acts go, I'm trying to think predating 9/11, I guess 96 Olympics.
Yes, in Atlanta.
Before that, 92 World Trade Center. Those are kind of the ones that come to my mind, which isn't a bad run. I mean, from early 90s to right now in 2018, what are we talking about, half dozen? So-ish? And I'm sure conspiracy listener fan of us can give us a million more, right? But those are the headline ones. Those are the ones that catch our attention. I wanted to piggyback off something, and I'm actually going to twist it slightly, so I apologize.
Well, first, Fred, before you go on to your next point, what about you? Do you think that this country is where you thought it was going to be in 17 years?
I want to say no. I want to say no with the benefit of hindsight now. So,
Right.
and what I think it is, it's at the time, because like I said, I had bought in, and I didn't just buy in on my own. I bought in because people that I revered and respected also did. So it became a point where the people who influenced my life had shared opinions as me, and as a young adult, that's good. That makes me feel accepted. That makes me feel like I'm
validated.
Yes, thank you, perfect. And a thing that I experienced really for the first time ever then, and although I love the '96 Olympics, I love the 2000 Olympics, like I loved all that stuff, but I wouldn't consider myself overly patriotic. I wouldn't consider myself. I didn't like if you'd be like, "Hey, Fred, what are you about?" I wouldn't be like, "I'm an American, dog." Like that wasn't how I identified, and I did, for the first time after that, I did. Like I was lucky. I was a prideful, cool dude that was willing to do some things because of this drive. And now I feel like 17 years later, that same kind of mindset is no longer positive.
Yeah.
Now I feel like 17 years later, I apologize, Mike. I'm going to let you get there. I feel like now, if that's like your sole identifier to me, I actually might have a problem with you.
Well, I feel like that mindset has been taken advantage of. And instead of using it to quote unquote love of country, it's used for fear of other people, other groups of people, to persuade you to vote for one political party over another. Putting it delicately,
the sense I had of on 9/12/2001 of. In that moment, being able to say that I would do at or near anything for this place that I love, I love America. The passion that I could have spoke at such a young, ignorant age, the passion that I could have spoke with then is equivalent, in my opinion, to the exact same passion I see from individuals being on social media or wherever, where they're, I love the Confederate flag. And I think, fuck. Like,
yeah.
Fuck.
Right. Like I said, it's been bastardized. It's like, hey, you love this country? You remember 9/11 when someone came onto our soil and killed innocent people? Which is true. And that's a terrible thing. So what they do is instead of saying, let's remember to use this to bring us together, let's not let it tear us apart. Hey, there's more of these types of people all over the place. And it's not just the Muslims. It's not just the people from Middle East countries. It's the Mexicans who want to come in. So what it's done is it's been harnessed, and it's been being used for, lack of a better term, it's being used for evil and not good.
I do not hate anyone that hangs out at a mosque. I sure as fuck hated Osama bin Laden.
100%.
I just think that's the simplest thing. Like, blame the person, don't blame the people. And I don't know where that concept got lost. I don't know where that went. But I'm telling you right now, 17 years post 9/11, dog, I'm let down. Like, I'm let down. Like, we're not as far as like unified. We're not as far as like directional. We're not where I thought we would be in my young, ignorant 17-year-old mind. And maybe it was never as good as they made out to me. I mean, we had so many intros. Civil rights is still someone's grandmother right now.
Right.
Like it's not like that's non-existent. Like we're not without blame or discord, but shoot, like we're not where I thought we would be. Not even fucking close.
No. And it seems like a lot of progress that was made since that day we've kind of gone back on.
I agree.
Yeah.
I know, I agree completely. So like I said, I think it's a neat conversation to have if you're at that point where communicating with others about it, I think it's a cool one because people have different perspective. Because there's going to be someone out there who is the same age as us and same socioeconomic, and maybe they did volunteer, maybe they signed up for the Army, maybe it shaped their entire lives, and they're going to tell you a different story. And I'm going to say that story is absolutely correct. Like there's
no wrong story.
Oh, there absolutely isn't. And like I said, an absolute defining moment in our lives, and that's not unique to us. It's true for everyone. But what you do with it is insanely different for everyone, and I really like that I like that mechanism.
Yeah, and and I think what it did, Fred, it sort of popped our bubble that day, right? Because on September 10th, 2001, you and I were 17 years old. I was growing up here in Detroit. You're growing up in St. Louis. And we were in our safe little bubble, right?
Yes.
We were in our safe little white middle-class bubble where America was the greatest and nobody hated us and, we treated everyone equally. And then that was popped. And then we started hearing some pretty bad things that we have done, none of which justified what happened on September 11th, and many of it was over-exaggerated, but it forced us to take a good, hard look at ourselves. And the phrase I hate the most is, if you don't love this country, you can just leave. Well, okay. You love your mom, you love your friends, you love your spouse, but if you feel like they do wrong, you're going to criticize it because you love them and know that they can be better than how they're acting this way. A lot of people might not know this about me, Fred, but I live in a house, okay? And
what?
And one time my hot water heater broke. And so Chelsea from upstairs comes up to me and says, "Our hot water heater's broke. We needed to get it fixed." I didn't look at her and say, "If you don't love this house, you can leave." I said, "Okay, let's fix the hot water heater because something where we live is broken. We have an opportunity to fix it. Let's try to fix it."
I like that. I like that a lot.
I was going to say if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. So you don't throw the house out for broken water here. No, I agree completely.
But you don't tell people that they leave if they don't 100% love everything about the country they live in. A lot of these people are complaining and debating because they love the country. They know it's great, but it can be greater.
I don't even know if that's necessarily like a negative to strive for, though. But the argument you're going to come to is my definition of greater is so much different than my neighbor's definition of greater. So what am I striving for? Like, what am I looking for?
Yeah, it's a good point.
Kind of my last little point, because I know sometimes we go a little long on these things. Kind of my last little point is there are certain times when I expect, and I feel like I always tie everything into politics, so I apologize. Don't hate me, Mike.
That's the way the world is right now, Fred.
I'm regularly looking in certain situations for a presidential response to things. God, I don't feel like I got it this year, right?
No.
No. Okay.
That doesn't mean that our current president, who I'm not a fan of, that doesn't mean he didn't do anything. I just didn't hear about him doing anything.
He talked about how great Rudy Giuliani was during it.
Talk about a guy who's fallen from grace since then. I mean, Rudy Giuliani. And
could have been president.
What's
then.
that? Yeah, right. And
yeah.
I'm sure that he didn't want his profile to be raised this way, but he was a political star after this happened because he did do a good job of kind of keeping New York united in their spirits up. And now he's just some dude on the take from from the reality show president.
Crazy times. We're living in crazy times.
Yeah, it's through the looking glass.
Hey, well, I got one last point, and I'm so sorry. If at that time we had the same resources at our disposal that we have today, which maybe we were just too young to realize that we had them, but I don't feel like we did. If there was 2001's version of Alex Jones, if there was 2001's version of that kind of like easily accessible conspiracy, whatever, you think that would have changed enough people's opinion, viewpoint, analysis on it that there wouldn't have been such a sweeping narrative at that time?
Are you talking about like the days immediately after where patriotism was at an all-time high, or are you talking about long-term?
Well, I'm talking about the immediate for certain. Like, I'll just, and I hate doing it. Like saying Boston Marathon bombing, Sandy Hook, these things happen same day. People are saying no, they didn't. It's bullshit. So do you feel like if those kind of conversations were being, or maybe they were, and I just don't know it. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's how ignorant I am.
Yeah. Back then there wasn't Facebook. There was news groups.
Right.
But it wasn't as mainstream as Facebook. I don't think so. I think in the days after, I think number one, people were scared, thinking that, the war might come to our shores, because it did for a very brief time. I think people were united for once in fear, but it was a fear that united us briefly. And with that fear, it was sort of a love, like a love you have for a relative that you kind of take for granted, and then they're sick and dying, and then like you love them again because you're like, oh man, our way of life is so great. I don't want to lose it. Everyone started thinking about the advantages of being American, and so no, in the days immediately after, no, I don't think it would have changed it, but I do think it would have accelerated what we're seeing now, and I think where we are now, this rabbit hole we're down, we'd be even further down it right now.
Do you know any, like, 9/11 deniers? Do you know anyone like that? I don't.
No,
I don't personally know any.
The only 9/11 conspiracy theorists I know of are the ones who say the government did it. I don't think there's anyone out there saying that it didn't really happen.
Oh, good point. The bad verbiage on my part. But do you know anyone personally, like you've sat down at the bar and they've been like, well, the narrative you got is the bullshit, and here's how I know the Freemasons did it?
Not personally. There's a couple on my Facebook feed that I've met once or twice, but not well enough to have had enough conversations for us to get into that.
Okay, but it's not like even if it's not like original thought stuff, right? It's just all regurgitation.
Yeah, everyone saw that documentary Loose Change or whatever, where they said that's where everyone got the original idea that jet fuel can't melt steel beams, and that Tower 7 that went down differently than the other two towers. I feel like everything kind of originated from that and has been furthered by the aforementioned Alex Jones.
Okay. That puts the bow on it for me.
All right. It is Parsons and Slow. By the way, we're on Sports Radio Detroit and AlienXRadio.com.
Do you love pop culture? Discussions about pop culture? Ranking and rating treasured pieces of that shared culture against each other?
I mean, I do think Flea's a good bass player. He does what he does very well. And like I said, he's like a rock star, He's eccentric. And what is so funny?
I just didn't know he talked so long about Flea. I didn't know anybody had so many feelings.
I do.
So many
I got
feelings.
yeah.
Music, movies, television, food, sports, pro wrestling. We are the determination of what is over or underrated across all fields of greater cultural consumption. Subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts and Podbean, or visit us at sportsradiodetroit.com. Over, under, fair. Your final word in pop cultural relevance.
So don't stay with me. If you say you're back up, it's okay.
All right, so full disclosure to everyone listening to Parsons and Slow here on Sports Radio Detroit.
Breaking fourth wall.
And AlienXRadio.com. Yes, we're giving you a behind-the-scenes peek. And we have to do that, Fred, when we have a story that develops as quickly as this Hurricane Florence, depending on when you're listening to us, that's either about to hit the Carolinas, is hitting the Carolinas, or has hit the Carolinas. So at this
more than likely has hit, because I mean, come on. I mean, people aren't going to tune in until next week, right?
That's true.
Okay, yeah. So
yeah.
it has hit. Okay,
yeah.
So the Carolinas they're destroyed.
Or boy, we dodged that bullet. Were all
shoot.
the warnings overblown? But yeah, there's not a whole lot of analysis we can give yet. But I have seen this story going around my Facebook feed about how Hurricane Florence is so powerful, it's sucking sharks out of the ocean.
Seems plausible.
And blowing them onto land.
I don't know how this couldn't be true.
This is the exact plot of Sharknado, except replace the tornado with a hurricane. This is the exact plot of an Ian Ziering, a.k.a. Steve Sanders from 90210 and Tara Reid movie. If you posted this, Fred, okay, if you posted this thinking it was a real news story, you should be banned from posting anything you think is news on Facebook, because you have obviously demonstrated the lack of an ability to discern what's real news and what is satire.
Florence and the Great Whites is a name of a band.
It's a Florence and the Machine's cover band. Well,
That is
or
yeah,
a
that
Great
is a
White
band.
cover band. Wow, how diverse would
dang.
that be?
God, they're going to get the listeners. I'm into this though. I like the idea. Here's some other things I feel like are going to be pulled out of the ocean. Octopus, obviously. Okay. Do you know what is it called when you're afraid of what's under the water?
Oceanophobia.
Yes, I have that. I full on have that. I watch videos sometimes of like scuba divers, and then like sharks will like not be there 1 second, and I'll blink, and then there's like a shark. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
Okay, so I feel like if you can, because right now I can successfully, regularly keep myself from scenarios where I will be surrounded by sharks.
Right.
But-
That's a pretty easy scenario to keep yourself safe from.
Right. There's like, okay, if you get eaten, bit, attacked, or interact with a shark, to me, you're really just a statistic, and it's not a shark statistic, it's a being a dumbass statistic. So, if there is a way for sharks to no longer be in their, what I'm assuming their natural habitat is, the ocean, if there's a way for them not to be there, but then to somehow propel themselves into my natural habitat, roads, then I'm in trouble. Now I got a problem with nature, and I'm going to fight global warming.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. Like you said, Fred, if you go into the ocean, you're eaten by a shark.
No big deal.
You're on the shark's turf. If I see a shark swimming in the road and I kill it, that's on my turf. It's nature going nature. It's like it's like a shark going shark if it eats you, and if I shoot one in the road, that's a human going human.
Apparently, this storm, Florence, this hurricane, is the largest hurricane ever?
Was it? Because I know Harvey was pretty big.
Ooh, Katrina.
Yeah. Well, the thing with Katrina, it was a Category 3, which is very powerful, but New Orleans is under sea level. So if it hits a city above sea level, it would have been devastating, but it wouldn't have been as devastating. Was Hurricane Katrina the first time that the weather forecasters stood outside in the hurricane, or was that just when it became mainstreamed? Because
Okay, Florence is only a Category 2.
Yes,
so
it's a
I'm buying the hype.
well, it might be the biggest in like size, though. It might be the biggest in size because it's as big as North and South Carolina combined.
You know a storm is serious. My dad always used to say this when we were kids. Because growing up in the Midwest, drastic weather change, floods, whatever. So you knew the weather was serious if they took off the cute little blonde meteorologist girl and brought in the dude with the tie. Like if they bring in and where I grew up, it was a guy named Dave Murray. If they brought Dave Murray on the TV,
Right.
that's when you knew it was. Oh shit! You gonna say Mike Roberts is here?
Oh crap! You got
Okay.
the ugly scientist talking about this shit. Just got real.
Shit. Okay. All right. Let's go down to the grocery, guys. We got to get all the bread, water, and peanut
Right.
butter we can buy.
Right. We got the ugly meteorologist that the good-looking weather people get all their info from. We better be in the basement. Well, you know,
That's
Fred,
a truth. That's true, right? Though,
well, it's funny because I've got a couple of friends, none that I've known, but I'm one of those weirdos that makes online friends on Facebook through different communities.
That's me and you.
A lot of friends who live in the Carolinas, and they've been posting these memes that says, Jim Cantori just got to town. Shit's about to get real.
Oh, did they do that?
And I feel like Jim Cantori is he's a pioneer of this. He was like the first guy to stand out in a hurricane like he wanted to fist fight it. Like
He makes it sexy, right?
right,
Like,
he stands up there. I'm waiting for him to drop to his knees, rip off his shirt, and yell to the heavens, "Is that all you got?"
here's what he has. He has, and we don't actually none of us know this, but similar to like notches on your bed, or like, or like Indian, like Native Americans when they had like axes and they would like scalp you, and they put he has it like tattooed on his chest. So he's got a Sandy, Katrina, Florence, like he's got them all just marked, like he's taking them all down.
Right, because the Weather Channel
The bad
won't let
guy
him
from Black Panther.
yeah, because the Weather Channel won't let him tattoo a teardrop on his
Right.
face.
But it wouldn't be a teardrop; it'd be a little hurricane.
Yeah, it'll be a little spiral cloud.
And he's out there, and God, he's so good. I'm glad you brought him up. So he's out there, and he's like, you're going to see lightning, and here's why. And you can tell there's no cue card. He's
Right.
not like, he's got it, and he's got it prepared, and he's going to tell you. There is this ignorance, though, and I'm going to use him as a prime example. There's this ignorance, well, we're just going to batten down. What?
Yeah.
Like, nature's trying to kill you.
Yeah.
Sharks are in the air.
Yeah. Yeah. The only reason you're still alive is because nature's letting you live. This is a scenario where nature might not let you live. So get yourself to a place where nature is going to allow you to live.
We're joking about sharks. Hurricanes really do pick up like fish. Like that's a real thing, right? So like it'll grab like stuff out of the water, and like you'll be at your house, and maybe you live, I don't know, a couple miles off the shore, and then like, oh, there's seaweed on my fence. And you're like, what? Because nature can do that to you.
Right.
They'll throw shit through your house.
Oh, it's just water. Water that's filled with razor-sharp steel and vehicles. This isn't like going to the wave pool. There's frickin' hunks of 3-ton metal in that water.
We've talked about this on the program before, but I think it's worth bringing up again. That tsunami in India. Do you remember that?
I do.
What was that? I guess that would have been 2010.
I feel like it was earlier than that. Hold on, let me.
Was it
Google
earlier than that? Oh, 2004.
Yeah.
So anyways, that one was the one where for the first time ever, I'm looking at like user created content on like an event, right? That's the first time I'm seeing like stuff flooding, and I'm watching on YouTube, and amateur journalism. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the first time I saw like amateur journalism really tell me an entire story. And I think there are people today like crazy, like Twister inspired, like storm chase dudes that are going to like try to find a way to monopolize off this. And I don't know if it's setting up deer cams or whatever
Right.
they're going to do. But like by the time this thing comes, we're going to get like somebody hiding out in like a local gas station, like giving their take on it. And it's 1 million people are going to watch it.
right before they die. Yes.
Yeah, seconds before they pass on to the afterlife, and people are gonna eat it up. They're gonna chew it up.
Well, right before we came down here to record this, I was watching NBC Nightly News, and they literally had 7 people in waders, either sitting in floodwaters or standing on the coast being battered by wind and rain. And I'm like, this is crazy.
What is the worst job to have during a natural disaster like this? Like, what is like the and I don't think
The
news- I
cameraman
don't-
for that guy, because the on-camera talent's getting the glory. You're just some putz holding a camera, and on top of being out in the elements, you have to stand up straight, and you're holding a heavy piece of equipment. So I'm going to say the cameraman for these people.
Okay, I hear you on that, but I feel like those people are probably getting a hazard kind of bonus.
Hopefully.
And I feel like those are jobs they want to have in a way to where they can. I'm thinking of like people who just like can't get away. Like who's someone, okay, like a security guard at a prison. Like
Yeah, that would be up there.
Like you can't leave. Like, and you might be stuck in a prison with prisoners. And according to MSNBC's lockdown, I don't think that prisoners and guards have the best relationship.
No, I don't think that they're holding hands and skipping. I don't know, maybe someone who deals with sewage. Probably whoever they
yeah,
probably
that would
have a
suck.
terrible job in this scenario.
Municipal government would suck. I could see that. There's people who have to like fix all of that. But okay, so we had the flood in '93 when I lived in St. Louis, and so the Mississippi River crests, and it crests like 35 feet or where it was above its banks, and all these homes were just and they were filled with mud, Mike. They were filled with mud, like. Yeah, I'm 6.5 foot tall. Just gigantic. Well, at the time I'm not. I'm like a child, but they're filled with mud up
You're
like
only
3 feet
6'2"
tall.
back then.
And all these people came in from around the country, and they were like, "This is a real thing." They were like, "Just tell your insurance company it's going to cost this because they're not going to come check it because there's so many of them, and we will literally with snow shovels scoop all this mud out of your house right now, and you write us a fat ass check." And people were doing it.
Yeah.
That's how cleanup efforts work. It's like a money grab. Natural disaster. Let's make some coin.
Sure. Looters, scammers. They
Oh
all
yeah,
come out of the
looters.
woodwork.
Oh, I forgot all about looters.
Yeah.
And I'm so cynical now. Like, if, say, I don't know, this thing's, either just hit or going to hit or is about to hit, depending on when you're listening. And let's say like 1 week later, people are back trying to hashtag rebuild their lives. And there's like somebody down there selling like ribbons for $1 to raise money for like people who didn't have like insurance or whatever. And I'm like, oh, are you, or is this a scam?
Right, fake charities. And
I'm like,
I feel like there's always a news story too, talking about how to spot scammer charities after one of these natural disasters.
cynical, man. I can't even help people.
Yeah, for real.
Hey, but for real, donate blood, Mike.
Yeah, I can. I've got eczema. It's an autoimmune disease.
I also have it, but it's not diagnosed, so I just kind of do whatever.
Yeah, so you're out there spreading eczema all over these hurricane-ravaged areas.
I'm fixing it with essential oils. It works really well. If you need, I can get you on my team.
Sure. You
So
pass
it's
you buy them at a discount and pass the savings on to me.
Yeah, it's a sure no-brainer moneymaker.
So Fred, you were talking about something going on in Europe that may make it tougher for DIY content creators like ourselves to.
Are you familiar at all with any of this? What's going on?
No, I'm not.
All right, let me paint the picture for you. I'm going to explain to you like you're 5. So the European Union is like everyone except for the United Kingdom. Cool?
Brexit, yeah.
Got it. So there was this idea, and I think they all have like a corporate office in like Brussels, right? So they all just hang out like hey, let's all make a decision together.
The
in a lot of
countries?
Yeah, the EU countries.
Okay.
They're like we should come up with like a governing body for this organization we put in, and if you don't like the way our body governs, you can just quit, i.e. Brexit. So they said the other day, this legislation is going to really censor like content creators, because what it's doing essentially is it's trying to assure that people who produce media are compensated fairly for the production of that media. So I'll give you an example. If you write a song or you create a picture or a movie or tell a story or whatever, no one else is allowed like in a creative industry to use that for anything, literally for anything without fair compensation. And I believe that can be decided on by the two parties. With that said, when's the last time you made a meme?
Back when I spent a lot of time on Reddit, but yes, it happens frequently.
Happens frequently. So right now, if you want to go and snag a picture from Disney Marvel's Avengers 3, The Revenge of Thanos, you cannot, if you're in the European Union, use a screenshot from that movie to express a message. Period.
And I feel like we have a little bit of that here in the United States. I'm sure technically if Marvel or what's the movie studio that owns that? Is it Sony
Disney.
Pictures?
Yeah, Disney.
Disney. I feel like if Disney wanted to, they could go after people who do that. But I feel like unless you make a sizable amount of money on something, it's probably not worth their time. Like, it's not worth Disney's time to have their lawyers scroll everyone's Facebook feed and see that someone made a meme and send them a cease and desist.
Well, I agree with that. In theory, yeah, it's not worth the effort. I agree. Go. Keep
but
going.
I do know that there was this long period of time when people would take Facebook Live videos and there'd be no sound because somewhere in that video a song would be playing. And there's some kind of mechanism in place where if copywritten music was being played, they would just kill the audio in the whole video.
Yeah, so there are free use laws, right? So you can use media produced by others if you're using that media for your own personal gain,
Yeah.
right? So like if you want to listen to the newest Mac Miller song, you can do that
Rest
in
in
your
peace.
own RIP. If you can do that in your own home with no consequence.
Sure.
Like that is absolutely fine. If you want to play that on your block party, like for your local block party barbecue, also no problem whatsoever. Perfectly fine. Now, if your block party wants to charge people $10 to come in, now you're down a slippery slope. Now you got to talk to you got to talk to all the licensing companies. You got to get permission. If you're gonna use that to create an environment that increases raised funds, then you cannot do that. And that's how free use works. You can utilize something as long as you're not utilizing it for monetary gain. That's the bottom line, direct or indirect.
So
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, you.
Now I want to, because I need you to finish explaining before I ask my question.
So if you're using something for monetary gain, be it direct or not, you have to pay. You have to pay for that. You just have to. So that's like ASCAP and BMI and all that kind of stuff. Specifically when we talk about music. Now, if you don't, then let your creative heart fly. Like do whatever you want. And now no longer in the European Union are you allowed to do that. No longer are you allowed to produce even modified media, like for anything.
So are these new EU rules, are they more strict than American rules, or are they kind of catching up to us?
1,000,000 times more strict.
Yeah.
Like 1,000,000 times more.
Well, then and then do you think then going kind of down that train of events, do you think that could influence fair use rules here in the United States down the road?
Oh, God. I mean, I believe anything crazy could happen, but I think the argument to say that you don't mess with fair use here in the United States is George. Do you know George Lucas? Are you familiar with George Lucas?
Yeah, he's made a few films.
Cool. Are you familiar with Gene Roddenberry?
No. Is he
created
one of the
Star Trek.
Sex Pistols?
He's not one of the Sex Pistols. He created Star Trek. So these two guys.
I apologize to our Trekkie listeners out there.
Gene
Sure,
Roddenberry.
Paul's hate tweeting me right now.
Oh, because he knows. But during the, I guess it would have been the 60s whenever Star Trek, the original series, came into fruition, and then during the 70s whenever Star Wars came into fruition, immediately afterwards, there was just this gigantic wave of fan film and fan fiction and fan manipulation and all this. And it's true for other films as well, but I don't give enough to say. So anyways, I would argue right now that Star Wars is what it is today because these people were allowed to, for so long, make it part of their lexicon, make it part of their culture, and do these things. And it wouldn't be worth $1 billion to Disney if so many people weren't allowed to embrace it in the way that they felt was the best way to embrace it. So because of primarily those two examples, I don't for a second believe it'll happen here. I don't for 1 second believe that people will be curbed on their fandom because fandom is worth a lot more money than charging people to talk about your thing.
Well, and George Lucas, I mean, he had such great foresight. I mean, he did those Star Wars movies for barely any money. He said, look, just give me merchandising rights. And we saw what happened. And I'm sure with him being more relaxed, with people being able to do things with the images he created, like you said, has built this into a subculture. And I hope you're right, Fred, because I hope the fair use laws don't get too strict here, because I got to tell you, I love watching a YouTube video of a song that I like with the lyrics sprawled across it. You can tell they use Windows Movie Maker, and then in the description, it says in all caps, I do not own the rights to this song. No copyright infringement intended. Because I'm sure once you get into a court of law, the lawyer for the company suing this YouTube kid's going to feel pretty stupid when they see that disclaimer and they can't sue them.
If the day comes that I get back on Facebook and I see just like a really great argument or a really ignorant argument, and I need to post that GIF of Owen Wilson going, wow, and I can't do that, that's a cold day in America.
Yeah, and that will be the day the terrorists have won, Fred. Were you spanked much as a kid?
Capital punishment, that's what we're talking about, murder?
Not quite. Physical punishment? No. Corporal punishment? No, I'm not talking about the death penalty, Fred. I'm talking about spankings.
Oh, yeah. As a child, I was disciplined physically, yes.
I was only spanked, I think I was spanked maybe 3 times, just enough to know that my parents meant it when they threatened to. And I'm not necessarily opposed to people spanking their kids if, the kids are doing something that's a danger to themselves or others. You've given them a couple of warnings, and they're not listening to you, or if you just can't get their attention. But there's this school down in Georgia that is sending out a permission slip. It's a charter school.
Corporal punishment. You had it right. Corporal punishment.
Say that one more time.
You had it. Corporal punishment.
Right.
You're a smart man. It is the act of striking the buttocks.
So not capital punishment. That's the death
No,
penalty. Yeah.
that's the one I was thinking.
Yes, corporal
Yeah.
punishment. Well, the school down in Georgia wants to institute corporal punishment. They're sending home a permission slip asking parents if they can spank their children. And essentially,
What?
here's the proposal, okay? If your kid gets 3 warnings, like, okay, Fred, one of us, back when we were in school, you got 3 warnings, you got detention or suspension. At this school, you get 3 warnings, and you either get a 5-day suspension or you can go into a room behind closed doors with an adult and an adult witness to make sure everything's on the up and up. And you can get 3 paddles across your buttocks. So
Jesus
those are your
Christ.
choices. To me, that's weird. Number 1, 5-day suspension or 3 swats across the bottom. Those aren't really comparable. To me, this almost sounds like they're trying to persuade you towards the spanking because this weirdo principal down in Georgia really wants to hit other people's kids.
Do you know what daycare costs for 5 days when your kid can't be at school but you can't miss work?
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's almost like he's putting you in a no-win situation because, you know, your kid misses 5 days of school. They're already acting up. They're going to be 5 days behind on instruction. And like you said, you got to find daycare for them or make sure they're not sitting around the house getting into more trouble. Or you can let them get hit 3 times across the bottom. It's almost perverse to me.
I don't feel like it's going to be rampant. I don't feel like a lot of kids are going to get corporal punished at school, but I do feel like the first kid to get it is going to deserve it.
Yeah, maybe. And
They right now have a hit list. Oh my God, that's the worst term to use. They
A
right now
SWAT
have
list.
Yeah, they have a SWAT list. They're like, well, we know little Mikey Jr. is going to screw up, and we'll make an example of him real early and real fast.
I'm going to make an indent on that kid's ass. He is such a little crap.
Can you imagine, like, do you remember, like, conversation, and I was kind of a screw-up kid, like, conversations you'd have with authority figures where, like, I was above reprieve when I was, like, a child. Like, you're gonna, like, talk harshly to me? I just don't care. Like, that was me.
Really?
But if you're like, oh, you're gonna hit me? Well, now I care. Now, that would be a problem for me. I can't imagine it's over a certain age limit, though, because, like, high school me was pretty big. High school me...
Yes.
Like that.
I would have loved to see a 5'2" balding biology teacher
Right.
swatting 6'5", 280-pound you with a pad.
Front of the room, Mr. Slow. Assume the position. Like,
Right. Well, the position
What?
in this, Fred, is you hold on to a piece of furniture, and it would make your butt protrude, and they would have no more than 3 swats with whatever paddle they use.
It would be like ergonomically designed, and like it would, like a scientist would need to create this paddle for maximum return.
Yeah, like you'd have little holes in it so that there'd be less wind drag.
Yeah, very dazed and confused.
Yeah.
Like it's like the Ben Affleck one, and like similar to earlier talking about Jim Catatori. Like you would have notches on it, like
Right.
of all these kids.
Right. Yeah. Slow.
Qs.
Parsons. Yeah.
That's what it's called. It's called a Q.
Yeah.
A Q.
That's right.
God, look at me, man. I'm so smart.
Yeah. See? And
there's no video here. I didn't Google that.
no, we do very little Googling during the show. We did for when the tsunami was. But look, if I'm a parent, Fred, number one, to me, this is the school district saying, we're admitting that we have no idea how to discipline children without corporal punishment. And 2, if I'm a parent and my kid brings this home, I'm calling up the principal and asking, what happened in his childhood that makes him want to be able to have permission to hit my child. Look, Fred, you were a big man. You were above reproach when you were in high school. But whatever hell I would have caught at home from my mom for getting in trouble at school was way worse than anything they could do at school. Like with me, and I think with kids, it's all about finding their weakness. My weakness is don't call my mom at work, because if you call my mom at all, and she's at work and you're bothering her, I'm going to have the wrath of Hurricane Florence raining down on me when I get home.
In the 4th grade, I stole a book from the book fair. My dad beat my ass, and I've never stolen since.
Right. So, honestly, I think it's the parents' job to decide when corporal punishment is appropriate and when it's not the schools.
It was a compilation. It was a bunch of Garfield comics.
And you never read Garfield. You never read after that either.
No, that's when I became Calvin and Hobbes only.
Oh, look, Fred, we're out of time. Thanks for listening, Pauls. Bye.
Good job, everyone. GG.